as you know, we are preparing for GC36. We need to think about electing a new general, and a lot of us are thinking this is very exciting and a very important moment for the society. But I think we're also looking for some kind of guidance as to how to go about this. And of course, we turn to the constitutions, where there's this wonderful section on the qualities of a general, and, well, you've written something about it which I found very interesting to read. I hope that will be made available to some of the electors as well. You talk about Ignatius's vision of leadership as based on character, and you say that's not the way that people think about leadership so much these days. Could you say a little bit more about that?
Sure. I think very often today, when we're looking for people in governance positions in wider society, we often focus on skills and specialist knowledge. And what tends to get eclipsed is the importance of good character. I believe that Ignatius, in this portrait of Father General, if you like, was really looking for a particular kind of person with a particular set of qualities, partly because he felt the general leads largely by example. He wants a good Jesuit who leads by example. And so one way of looking at this portrait is, this is a picture of what a good Jesuit is like. After they've been formed through the spiritual exercises, through the whole process of Jesuit formation and ministry. And he trusts that kind of person to lead the society.
You say it's a portrait of a Jesuit at the end of formation, and immediately I think, well, it's not me. And probably if I was in a cruel mood, I might sort of condemn a few of my brothers as well. I mean, it's a very idealistic picture. Is it relevant? I mean, can we really expect someone to match up to that?
I think it's ideal. It's an ideal, certainly, but I wouldn't describe it as idealistic.
Okay.
One way of thinking about it, if you think of the Jesuit you most admire and love, and then ask, what exactly is it about this Jesuit that I love so much? And I think pretty quickly you'd come up with a set of qualities.
Right.
That he's a prayerful person, that he's a loving and compassionate person, that he has a wisdom, those kind of things. And those are the kind of things Ignatius is talking about in this portrait. So he really is talking about, yes, an ideal, but also real qualities of real people.
If you read the list, I mean, he starts off with what you might call spiritual qualities. He talks about he's very familiar with God, close in union to the Lord. Is it as though he's saying that's the bottom line? You know, you can go for anybody as long as they have that kind of quality? I mean, what sense do we make of the list? Is it the first one's the most important and the rest are less important?
I think the answer to that would be yes and no.
Good Jesuit answer.
He certainly places the spiritual qualities of the general first in importance. But what does he mean by that? He talks about friendship with God in prayer and in action. So he's not talking about someone who's spending 7 hours a day in prayer all the time. He's talking about someone who finds God in all things, in all activities, his characteristic Ignatian spirituality. And that's important for Ignatius, that's the fundamental quality, because there's a match between who Father General is and what the society is for.
Okay.
That the purpose of the Society of Jesus is a spiritual one, to help souls. And so Father General should be a spiritual leader using spiritual means for a spiritual end.
Okay.
But at the same time, we have to interpret that in an Ignatian sense of spiritual, which is not a sort of detached, and a detached spirituality at all.
That's superbly important, isn't it? Because it's almost as though it's the reverse order from the way most people usually think about leadership.
And that is a striking thing about this set of 6 qualities. It's not just a random list, as it were, but it has a very specific ordering. You could think of it this way, that in the world, people value what Ignatius would call external gifts above all, the status and riches. They also value in our society, especially physical health and beauty.
Right.
They might look at someone's achievements, their CV as it were. They might also have some respect for intelligence and learning. If you're lucky, they might value good character and qualities of the heart. And if you're really lucky, they may even pay some kind of attention to spiritual qualities. For Ignatius, it's the other way round. He begins with the spiritual qualities as the most important. He wants a Jesuit with a sound character and a good heart. He wants someone of learning and of practical wisdom. And he also does characteristically emphasize the importance of action, someone who can initiate great projects and carry them through to the end. He values the body, and he even thinks that the worldly goods, if you like, of former wealth and status can be used for a good end. So it's all in there, but it's a reverse ordering to that of the world, if you like. He's turning the values of the world inside out and upside down, if you like.
Okay, very helpful. I use the word just there, practical wisdom. You're a virtue ethicist, so I assume you're thinking about the virtue of prudence, about which I know absolutely nothing. Tell me what this word means, because to me, to my modern ears, it sounds like being terribly cautious, ever so careful, possibly not doing anything rather than taking a risk. Is that what Ignatius wants our general to be like?
Well, I think you're certainly right that the word prudence today tends to mean a kind of cautious, calculating self-interest. That clearly isn't what Ignatius has in mind. And what we notice if we look at the virtue words that come from this very rich tradition, that very often they've sort of dwindled over time and distorted in their meaning. Take the word charity, for example. Today, people think of throwing a few pence to a homeless person on the street. But charity is much deeper than that in the tradition. Obviously, it's the love of God and love of our neighbour. It's what it's all about at the end of the day. It's similar with prudence, or what I call practical wisdom. For Ignatius, this was an incredibly important virtue, the rule and measure. He puts it in the autobiography.
It's just the one that coordinates all the others. So without this, none of them hang together.
And when he looks back in the autobiography on his young self shortly after his conversion, he says, that Ignatius didn't know anything about prudence as the rule and measure of the other virtues. So it's really the mark of spiritual maturity for him.
Okay,
so prudence, or his favourite words, I think, for this quality, discretion and discernment, are obviously characteristically Ignatian. And if we wanted to look for an exemplar in the Christian tradition of these qualities, we'd be hard pressed to find a better one than St. Ignatius. We see it in the spiritual exercises in discernment. We see it in his whole approach to the constitutions. He tells Jesuits and superiors especially that in this circumstance do this, or if it's different do this, or at the end of the day judge according to times, places and circumstances. So really he's conveying the message that he trusts at the end of the day the good sense of a well-informed Jesuit.
There's another word which I find it a bit hard to understand, but I get the impression that it's incredibly important for Ignatius. And I've heard Pope Francis using it, talking about the purpose of Jesuit education. It's magnanimity, having a great soul. What does that look like? I mean, how do you recognize somebody who has a great soul?
Magnanimity is Ignatius's signature virtue.
Right, okay. It's his brand virtue.
His brand virtue, if you like. It's the one his companions in the early society most recognise as Ignatius's own. And really it's the virtue of living in that tension between reality with all of its limitations and what could be, always being willing to consider what could be more for God's greater glory. We see it in the spiritual exercises when Ignatius says the one beginning the exercises should begin with a magnanimous generosity towards the Lord, being willing to give it everything they have, if you like. We see it also in his emphasis constant throughout his writings on the virtue, on the margis. So you could think of magnanimity as the virtue of the margis, if you like. Pope Francis, when he was, as you rightly point out, was when he was talking to the Jesuit students of Albania and Italy, said that the purpose of Jesuit education, at least as far as formation of character is concerned, is this quality of living in the margins, of being a magnanimous person, and his spin on it being a person of big heart, open to God and open to others.
It's a wonderful, memorable phrase, that, isn't it? I mean,
yeah, and it rings true because it comes from the man himself. Yeah,
he does seem to live it out in a particular kind of way, yes. It's an aristocratic virtue, isn't it? The sort of generous, magnanimous. I mean, it sounds. Is there a little bit of a hint in Ignatius that he's an aristocratic man himself? He would rather like the general, if possible, to be of noble bearing.
I think it's important to recognise that whilst this virtue began with the Greeks, and you see it in Aristotle as you know, this kind of magnanimous generosity towards the lesser mortals around me, but it really gets transformed in the Christian tradition, and Ignatius is extending that tradition imaginatively himself, and it's becoming a much more theological virtue, if you like, a virtue of giving myself and my all to God. And it's not about my own glory and my own honour, as it maybe was for Aristotle. It's for God's greater glory.
Okay, that's very helpful indeed. Listen, Nick, you've said some magnificently helpful things. Thank you so much. Give us a summary. Give us a summary of what Ignatius is looking for. You know, something we could just write down on a card and use to sort of go around out in that meeting room where we're going to meet each other and have a sense of how to approach this. What are the really essential aspects here?
I think Ignatius is looking for a person, above all, of spiritual depth.
Right. Yeah.
He hopes for someone who is humble, who is loving and strong. He wants someone with a kind of emotional inner freedom. And academic learning is important, but above all, he wants someone with practical, relational, and spiritual good sense, good judgment.
Okay.
Someone also who can initiate projects and carry them through to their end. Someone, if you like, whose spirit, soul and body is living the margins.
Okay. It's already sounding as though I might just meet somebody like that at the congregation, which is an awful lot more hopeful than how I started out a few minutes ago. But just supposing we don't, is there any kind of really bottom line? You know, if all else fails, does Ignatius give us that kind of flexibility?
I think Ignatius does. He recognises it is an ideal,
yes,
and may not be, you know, someone may not tick all of the boxes, as it were. So he ends by saying, well, at least these three essential characteristics: someone with good character, someone with a deep love of the society, and someone with good sense.
Okay.
With God's grace, that will be enough.
Such people exist. I'm sure I have met some. Nick, thank you very much indeed from me and from all the electors who hear your thoughts. It's been very helpful indeed.
Thank you very much.